African Renaissance TV from wherever spatial you are watching us from. This is the Sustainability Track and I am Mohammed Bibayi. Today is going to be a fascinating day in the world of Renaissance because we are here to talk about the African Renaissance. And to form a conversation around this, I have a name that does not need an introduction. Professor Gibril Faal, the co-founder and director of GK Partners, an education and development executive in the world, in this world that we live in today. And to get this conversation rolling, Professor, thank you for granting us this invitation and then to have this interview here with you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. It's my honor and privilege to join you at the Africa Renaissance TV network. Thank you.
That's quite a pleasure to be here. So like I said, our topic of discussion is going to be centered around the African Renaissance. And I want us to kickstart the discussion around that. From your perspective, what can you tell us about the African Renaissance?
Well, Renaissance means rebirth. I suppose it's a rebirth to what? And all the glory before the dark ages of Africa. Of course, Africa is often portrayed as the continent of problems. It is true, we do have many problems. And perhaps one can say that since this transatlantic slave trade and the other Arabian slave trade and others, it had been sort of the dark ages for us. And one form of oppression was replaced by another form of oppression. And we have emerged and are emerging out of it. The idea of a Renaissance rebirth is to aspire back to the glory and the successes before the encounter with our oppressors. And that encounter, or that rebirth is to learning, to civilization, to contribution. And I suppose when we discuss these days about African Renaissance, it is to effectively sort of change the narrative of Africa before the encounter with our most recent oppressors over the past 300-400 years.
That's quite apt when it comes to the setting a baseline for our discussion today, Renaissance, as far as the African perspective is concerned. It is often said that Renaissance, the African Renaissance revolves around culture, education, and political revitalization of the whole African continent. But if you were to say how important are these, especially on the economic front, how important is it, what importance does it hold to the Renaissance of, the Renaissance ambition rather of Africa?
Well, the Renaissance is not just culture, it's everything. If we take the well-documented European Renaissance, of course, there was flourish in arts and culture and the creative industries, as we know. But there was a rebirth to learning, science and technology. And for the European Renaissance, that was partly due to the encounter with Islamic science and the Moorish sort of invaders of Southern Europe. So I think the African Renaissance would be going back to the fundamental contributions to civilization and to human development. So culture and art is certainly part of it, but it is not necessarily even the core part. It would be contribution to technology, contribution to science, contribution to engineering, because these are all areas that Africans had made their mark and given a gift to human civilization before our dark ages, as it were. So in my view, it would be that broad and that general rebirth and boost to our contributions to human development.
Interesting. That is quite broad, and then I want to be specific this time on education.
Yes.
This is taken as a cornerstone for most people when it comes to the Renaissance of Africa.
Yes.
It is believed that education holds an important role to the attainment of our ambition when it comes to the African Renaissance. But how can African countries come together to achieve this aim, especially with education?
Yes, you may know my view about education, that I'll use the Wolof expression of ham, man, and am. So ham is knowledge, man is skills, and is wealth. And I think we should not separate them, because the pursuit of just philosophical knowledge and for knowledge's sake has its place. But it needs to be part of the other things that we need. So that brings you to some of the fundamental debates as to what's the purpose of knowledge. And my argument, I belong to the school that says, let all be together. We have knowledge just for the pure joy and the pure blessing that we have with the human brain to be able to imagine things that are just so wonderful. And those things allow us to then take out from it things that are useful. I tend to give the example that technology is older than science in the study, in the history of humankind, in that even non-humans are able to use technology and tools, but they do not understand the science of why does it work. So if you take a piece of stone to break a knot, you're using technology, but the theory and the concepts of force and power and work in physics that explains it, that's science. That's much younger than technology. Where we are in the Renaissance, I'm saying we have to do all. Let us have the conceptual knowledge. Let us have the practical skills. Let us from that generate a sustainable and ethical wealth.
Well, talking about a sustainable and ethical wealth, I think especially given your specific background on economics, I want to share this one on economics. Economics with growth and development is also seen as an integral part of our ambition as far as this Renaissance journey is concerned for Africa. But if you were to throw some light on this, what would you say are some of the sustainable economic strategies that we need as a continent to be able to head into the right direction?
Again, I think we need to be pluralist. It is useful to look for areas that we have comparative advantage, but you know what? There are areas we do not know that we may have comparative advantage in unless we do it. If you look at what has happened in the past 50 to 60 years with the information technology revolution, who would have thought that these are areas where entirely new industries have been created? So Africa, and we are big enough, we're creative enough, so it is useful that we follow through on almost everything that increases productivity, that generates inclusive wealth. Because with this growth, you had classical arguments of just going for growth. You had arguments that there's limits to growth, otherwise something must give, and one area that gives is the damage that we do to the environment. But you have on the economic front the other bit where you can have growth and not development, in that the growth and the rewards to growth goes to a very small number. And in a perverse way, technology and where we are now with technology actually encourages that. I'll give you an example in the field of taxi service and minicabs. So you would have had tens of millions of taxi companies and minicabs across the world. But using technology, now you have a small number of companies led by Uber, who now become the taxi company of the world. Yeah. So that's, in terms of the mechanics of the business, it's brilliant business, brilliant use of technology, but it is killing off millions and millions of other businesses because it's taking it in. So for things like that, to regulate growth, to redistribute, this is why the role of government, public sector, civil society is still important. That we must remember and must attain the equality and the justice, whereby when you have growth, when you have development, there's redistribution. If the people are displaced, that something else is found for them. And that can be done not only in the normal way of taxation, but creating other opportunities that people can access and make good and decent livelihoods.
That is important. I think, like, if I can pick from what you said, when it comes to governments and civil society organizations, and that will lead me to the next phase of this, to say collaboration and partnership. There is a huge argument that we cannot attain our growth and development needs without collaborating and partnerships as Africans and in fact globally as people living in the world. And how important would that be? And then if you may want to share some examples of some cross-border strategies as far as partnerships and collaborations are concerned for the advancement of the African continent, what would those be?
I agree entirely that Africa partners and collaborates formally far less than any other region. And that's been recognized for a long time, and there's been developments. And as you know, the African Continental Free Trade Area is now functioning, and its ambitions, our goals are worthy and need to be supported by all parties. Now, informally, if you take informal trade, there has been far more collaboration in that people are doing it themselves. The problem has been when the states get involved and then impose the restrictions. So, but wherever the restrictions are not there, people do it naturally. Because even what we call these boundaries, they are extremely artificial, because these colonial boundaries are extremely artificial and have not always succeeded in actually creating barriers, because cross-boundary trade and business comes. And an impediment for many African countries, in my view, has been this almost unhealthy insistence on these narrow sovereignty arguments. This is my country, this is my boundary, I control. I think we need to be far more comfortable with a relaxed approach to be trading, to interact, from not only mobility of humans, but mobility of goods and resources. We're having this interview in the Gambia, small place. Our three sides of the country is in Senegal, and we have the Atlantic Ocean. Now, there's many things we can do. Why do we have a different tariff system on mobile phones between Gambia and Senegal? They can, if they wanted to, sit down in 1 week and thrash out an agreement, and it is one tariff. Why do we still have unnecessary border controls? I understand how do you distribute the flows of income, but one can have that discussion, how do we share flows of economic growth, rather than these unnecessary, in my view, restriction to trade, enterprise, and mobility, both for business and, of course, for general enjoyment of freedoms.
Collaboration is indeed necessary, and partnership can only be a collaborative factor and positively to drive the aims and aspirations of the Renaissance, and then for a better world for all of us. And I want to chip in a bit, and it comes to the challenges that we are facing. One can identify poverty, healthcare, environmental sustainability, to name a few amongst them, as very disturbing when it comes to the achievement of growth and then developmental ambitions of our people here. And to look into this, but then what are some of those steps that we can take, not just governments and then individuals per se, to contribute to this positively, to be able to fight against the likes of poverty and the challenges that we face as far as healthcare is concerned, and then today in a climatic condition of environmental health or environmental sustainability. What are some of the things that we need to do?
Yes, there are problems everywhere, but for the entrepreneurs and for aspiring entrepreneurs, the problems are the opportunity to find solution. It's easier said than done, because it needs creativity. Sometimes you need the resources to do it. But if you look at people, communities, entities that have succeeded in innovating and creating and solving problems that are difficult, you find that one of the most important points is the attitude and approach. That is, they confront the difficulties. The first thing they think of is not who is it that we can blame, and how is it that we can analyze to death as to the nature of the problem. They're very quickly thinking, how do I solve this?
So it's like the focus is on the solution.
On the solution. And that is not just a common sense idea, but there's some neurological effects on the brain itself. If you're thinking in a particular way, your brain is then guiding you towards a particular way. Then almost by magic, it leads you that solution. So then the attitude and the approach I'm thinking is very useful. Second is, one does not need to try to be the genius. Most of us are not geniuses. Geniuses are very rare. So what we do is you learn, you steal, you borrow. Look at what else have worked and see how you can make it work to your circumstances. Third, don't believe in just your strengths and your goodwill and your willpower. They're not enough. So you might borrow tools. What tools, what mechanisms, what structures, what systems can you use to make it happen? And then, of course, you've mentioned collaboration. Inevitably, you are unable as a person to do things by yourself. Who do you bring? How do you bring them? And how do you make sure that there is mutual benefit for the common purpose of getting the progress or the production that you're looking for? But that means individually, then as small groups and bigger entities, we can all do our part. And all of the good things we see around ourselves, that is how it's worked.
And in order to take a huge step as far as those good things are concerned, like you said, the mentality, the way we allow our brains to function around scenarios and problems are very important. But I want to take this as the last question, maybe before we take a short commercial break, and then, because youth, as far as Africa is concerned, form the huge substance as far as the numbers are concerned. We have a youthful population. In fact, in the Gambia, to be precise, we have a higher percentage of youth than any other sector. And then what advice would it be for youth in the fight against or in the fight for development and growth?
Yes.
Especially economic development.
Yes, so and it's not easy for young people because in many parts of the world, including even Gambia, it's a mixed story that in some cases it's more difficult for young people to make a breakthrough, whereas in some areas are easier because you have new technology, new resources that were not there before. Again, I take a lesson by just looking at what has worked. So, and I do really want to emphasize the power of technology. I have encountered many young people in Gambia, in different parts of Africa, different parts of the world, who have used the technology to teach themselves things they were not able to get from the formal institutions. But still, the driving force is the attitude. They already have the attitude that I need to learn this, I want to do this. That positive approach, then learn. By learning, you are gathering tools, intellectual tools, as it were, to be able to get on with things. And young people also can't do it. So the public institutions and the adults have a huge responsibility for support. And the support of young people means tolerating a degree of experimentation and even foolhardiness. Because young people are likely to take certain risks and make mistakes that we think it's a mistake, they'll go wrong. But give them the chance to try. In some cases, they would come out with things there that nobody could have imagined. Yes, and even in classical business, the risk-taking is an important part. And young people are more likely to take risks simply because they have less to lose. And that risk-taking, as long as it's channeled towards a positive and productive area, bodes well for what one can have, both for that individual and for their families and communities and the countries they live in.
Well, that is it for the youth. And like I promised myself, we will take a short commercial break in as much as I'm enjoying the conversation. And then there is a lady behind the camera who is always saying that it's time to take our first commercial break. But when we return, we can have the conversation continue from there. This will take us to our first commercial break. From here, then we'll come back to have the conversation for you, Prof. that short commercial from wherever you're watching us. This is the Sustainability Track, and I am Mohamed Bibaji. Our topic of discussion is the African Renaissance, an important topic that we've been shedding light on as far as our aims and ambitions are concerned for growth and development as a continent. Helping me in this, I am here with Professor Gibril Faal, who is guiding us on to advices, experiences, and then possible solutions to the very many problems of our society. Prof, welcome back from that short break.
Thank you.
Like I promised myself, we will keep on the discussion from there, from where we stop as far as the positives are concerned, and then the hopes for a better continent and a better world for everyone. I want to look at this aspect of it, diaspora. Specifically when you come to the Gambia, for our development, we've been seeing over the last 5-10 years the impact of our diasporans, not just, especially in terms of economic growth, has been that helpful for the people. So how important is that for our aspirations of growth as a country?
Particularly around finances and development finances, diaspora are particularly important. And Gambia, as you may know, has the highest dependence on diaspora remittances in Africa than any other country. Even when you go with the lower numbers that the World Bank publishes, it puts it at about 28%. So that makes it #1 in Africa. And if you go with the higher numbers that the Central Bank of the Gambia publish, the percentage in terms of a ratio or as a percentage of GDP is very high. And we also know that it is perhaps more effective in that this is not intermediated money. These monies are going directly into households. They're not going to government or projects who then make decisions on what to do. It is going directly into households who then make decisions and spend it directly, as it were. It has another big effect for countries like Gambia in that it is coming in the form of highly needed foreign currency, in dollars, in euros, in pound sterling, which the country needs for its import, because we import far more than we export, so that hard currency comes in. And this story, although Gambia is sort of at the extreme end of dependence, but it's a sort of microcosm of the situation in Africa and other parts of the world. We've seen from Israel to China to India to Philippines, other parts of the world, the diaspora and their finances has played critical part in the economic development of those countries. I'll just give you one example in Morocco, where that it's not only just the finances but expertise. Right now, a story that's not much known is the importance of Morocco, the Kingdom of Morocco, in the world of aerospace technology. It is a very big industry. They support the big OECD countries in this field, this highly specialized field. And this has happened because of Moroccan diaspora in these fields, working in these big companies, who have, with the support of their government, helped establish that global business into the country with huge financial, economic, and technological impacts. So I think, as a matter of policy, both Gambia and many countries in Africa accept that principle, recognize it. Where they may fail is the extent to which they facilitate the optimal sort of extraction of that benefit.
That is quite interesting, and then the facts surrounding that is quite fascinating, and then it is important for people to be able to recognize the role that diaspora is playing to the economic lives of the people. And like you said, this impact is happening to people directly. It's not like there is an intermediary where the people have to go pass through first. It's like people having access to funds directly, and that is quite important. I want to do a shift in this when it comes to Africa in general. the word Renaissance has somehow now become a household name, and then this is quite important for the awareness of everyone to be a part of this journey. But if you were to say as an advice for a continent, especially in terms of policy, what are some of the key things that we must do now? Just maybe, let's say, I know there can be thousands of them, but a few of them that we could do in terms of policy.
Well, in terms of policy, I think policy we have enough. I'm a practice person. We have a lot of policies. Since Thabo Mbeki started championing this African Renaissance about 15, 20 years now, building on all the movements that have been going on for many decades. Many countries have created the policy. We are failing in the practice in facilitating it. For example, now, most African countries allow dual citizenships for the diaspora, so that's the law. But they might still encounter a whole lot of difficulties getting the paperwork or being fully integrated in the local economies. The African Union, it was way back in 2005 that it defined the diaspora as its sixth region. And when it defined that, it didn't just say people like me who was born in Africa and traveled outside. It says, no, all generations of diaspora, the African American diaspora, the Africans in Brazil, the Africans in India, the Africans in Sri Lanka, all of these, as long as they're interested in the development of Africa, they form part of it. So we're failing on practice. And my suggestion to practice is, ask why, when someone's come with a positive idea, the starting point is why not? If you don't have a reason why you shouldn't allow it, you should allow it. Whereas in many cases, coming from civil service of government, they tend to always ask why. And then they would find reasons and barriers.
Okay.
So my suggestion is, we don't know, we as humans, we learn a lot, we understand things, but what we don't know is a lot. So just take a broad view. Is this broadly a good thing? The person is pushing it. Are they broadly, the people doing it, are they broadly good people with good wills? And if that is the case, allow it to happen. You can put in some systems so that if it goes wrong, damage is limited. But you must allow for that experimentation and for things to happen. And sometimes it's purely that experimentation. You try it, it doesn't work. That should not then be a death knell to anything. It should in fact be something we learn from to move on, to improve.
Well, that's quite interesting. Practice is an important element, like you said. Even if we have billions of good policies, if there are the practical element of it is missed and is lacking, progress will not be attained.
Yes.
And then I want to sift onto that. Talking about practice, the African Renaissance TV is championing a project known as the Renaissance is Africa Pitch Competition, where this project is going to be like a regional competition in the Gambia, including all the 7th region. And then, like you said, what is very important to your interest is the 8th region, the diaspora. This competition is going to be like a pitch competition that will have an implementing phase. That's the practice you are talking of. How important do you think projects like this will hold to our development?
Yes, I suppose the important thing there is that it is sustainable in that it can continue to support itself. And pitch competitions and business plan competitions, project competitions are very good to inspire new ideas, to give opportunities. But sometimes we know that the cash money they may win or the support may not be enough for everything they need to do. And my understanding of this particular one is not only bring in cash, but bring in the institutional support, the partnership, so that the projects that win are able to be permanent implementers of those programs. And I think that almost is a niche, and we support that, and we are pleased that you developed this. And yes, when you're talking of the Gambia, there are no 7 regions in the Gambia, there are 8 regions, at least since January of 2018. Because as you know, the president declared the diaspora as the 8th region, and that was actually in September of 2017 whilst he was attending his first United Nations General Assembly, and it was formally incorporated in the Gambian Diaspora Strategy, which is fully incorporated in the National Development Plan. So yes, your 7 regions are the geographical regions, and then the non-resident region of the diaspora. I hope, I'm looking forward to seeing the pitches that come from the diaspora. But I understand in your program you've even got a very interesting region, which is the non-Gambians in Gambia.
In the Gambia.
And that's very powerful because integration, cooperation, and African Renaissance, it makes sense to bring them in. And yes, I'm very impressed the way you thought this through.
Well, we are on the road to practice. Policies have been as important as they are. We have a collaborator now that is in the form of a practical implementation of things. And then we are hoping that this journey becomes a start. But from the whole Renaissance team, from the African Renaissance TV, we are honored to have a time with you. But before we can, for Professor Gibril, anyone listening out there would really want a general advice to the African continent, this especially the youth of this generation. What advice would you have for Africans and African youths, to be specific?
The love of Africa is the love of self. So the starting point is love yourself, which means you love, it's the person, the family, the community, the country. And there is strong African tradition of this here in Gambia, and that includes, that's why we survive. If you think of the assaults Africans have faced, if you think of the problems that we've encountered, and we should have perished. And part of the reasons why we haven't perished is some of these deeply held connections that we have. I emphasize this point of community and connection for young people is because as we become more westernized, we tend to be more individualized. And then, of course, the individual becomes far more important than the community. I tell you, that is a big peril, that's a big danger to us. And the countries that have gone that way are beginning to regret it. It is very, very expensive to maintain, and the basic fabrics of society begins to fall. So I would say the individual, by loving yourself, it means you love your family, your community. And when you have that love, then you see the other decisions you make. That is, do I really want to wake up at dawn to struggle on a piece of work because of the love you have for yourself and your community to support them? That is what will inspire you. So the inspiration then comes from within rather than what an adult is telling you or what a boss is telling you. So that's the most important thing. Then we cannot overemphasize the importance on positive thinking and solutions. That doesn't mean one is naive. You have to understand the problems, but focus on how you are going to solve it. And if you are not able to, who else can you work with to solve it? And the magic will happen. In a small way or a big way, you tend to find a way through.
Well, in as much as I am loving this, and I would love to have this continue for hours if possible, and Prof, but this is something that we must end here due to your precious time. And then in as much as we have an insatiable patience and then wish to listen to Prof for advices and technical support, like you said, the love for self, patience, the belief and ability of positive thinking, and then the belief in the cause of a renaissance as holding key to development and growth for the entire generation and for the entire African continent is an important part. So we are going to take that, and we will also be saying a big thank you once again for granting us this opportunity to have a conversation with you. Well, that brings us to the end of our coverage here on the Sustainability Track with our our able Professor Gibril Faal here in Key Point, and it's an interesting place to be in. But to have more insights and programs coming your way from the African Renaissance TV and very many episodes of the Sustainability Track, stay tuned. If you have not subscribed into our platform, subscribe now to get more insights into that and see what African Renaissance have for you in the Renaissance is Africa Pitch Challenge. This is just around the corner. Every region, every person should be ready for this, and then Africa is going to realize its aim together is the message for as far as we are concerned here. And this has been Mohammed Bibaji